Tonight on Nation to Nation, wildfires in Alberta wreaked havoc on Métis and First Nations communities. The scale of the destruction is now being calculated.
You know, I think it's that time where, you know, the stuff they had lost is now sinking in.
Conservative MP Raquel Dancho says tightening up the bail system would provide better safety.
We feel that the most important thing is to protect Indigenous women and victims. The rights of Indigenous victims needs to be put primarily first.
And a First Nations leader wants to see a reset of the proposed legislation to create a National Reconciliation Council.
It has to go back to our First Nations to get more input, more inclusion. That was our direction.
Ani Bojo, welcome to Nation to Nation. I'm Annette Francis. Wildfires continue to rage in Alberta. Thousands of people from First Nations and Métis communities have been forced to evacuate. Last week, 1,600 people were forced to flee the Sturgeon Creek Cree Nation. The East Prairie Métis settlement in northern Alberta also has been hit hard. Fire destroyed 29 homes there. East Prairie resident and firefighter Frankie Payu stayed behind to save his home and others in the community when he was injured battling a fire. Payu is currently in hospital in a coma. Dave Lamouche is the president of the Métis Settlements General Council. He joins me now. Welcome, President Lamouche.
Yes, thanks for having me, Annette.
First of all, can you give us an update on Frankie Payu's condition?
Yes, he's still under induced coma as we speak. I heard as of last night that he was still in the hospital. The family has been by his side, basically staying in the city and supporting him as well. So,
what's the wildfire situation in the province like today?
Well, according to the province, this morning, the information this morning we got, there's still 96 fires that are going. 23, I think, are still out of control, and the displacement of evacuees is around 24,000, I think, still. So, it's still going as strong as it was originally. So in the last few days, it picked up again. So.
Wow. There's been a lot of devastation in the East Prairie Métis community. Can you give us an update on where the people are and how they're holding up?
Yes, the people are still in evacuation order. They've been there for over 14 days. As we mentioned before, there are 14 families that were displaced. Many of their structures burnt down, including 29 homes is what I had heard, and 14 of them were being lived in, and sheds, garages, barns, stuff like that. And they lost everything. Those houses were just decimated.
What is it do these people need now?
They need a lot of, not just a lot of physical support in terms of, clothing and diapers for kids and, things like that, hygiene stuff, clothes for the men and women as well. A lot of moral support, a lot of encouraging, words from them. They need prayers. I think it's that time where, the stuff they had lost is now sinking in. So they're going to need, things like new housing, new, furniture to, once they get back into the community. As of yesterday, they were told that they cannot return at least another 4 days. The hot spots that were there that were smoldering have picked up again because of the winds that picked up. So, they're starting from ground zero again, a lot of these people.
How satisfied are you that people are getting the resources from the province and federal governments that's needed to cope with this disaster?
I think the people that are on the ground are saying it's very slow, not just from the firefighting side, but in terms of getting aid. And sometimes there's a few complications regarding being able to receive the monetary aid. People have been displaced for, like I said, 14 days. People haven't been able to go to work. Students haven't been able to go to school. So there's logistics that come into play. Monetary donations are slow, but we are receiving a lot of donations in terms of the things that I mentioned, clothes and food and water and stuff like that. So as far as the government responding, it's kind of a catch-22 because they're still fighting the fire, and it's not rebuilding time, so there hasn't been any real commitment made, although lots of commitment has been made verbally.
Okay. It may be too early to talk about this, but has there been any thought into how to lessen the impact of future wildfires?
I think disaster plans need to be developed. Fire guards need to be established, as they did in the wildfire that happened about 10 years ago in Slave Lake. There's a big perimeter around the community of Slave Lake, or the town of Slave Lake, was established. I think things like that need to be done. Emergency management preparedness plans need to be developed and implemented. We can't just put pen to paper, but physical stuff need to be bought as well, like generators, like when power goes out, to be able to hook up instantly generators that'll power up communities that might not have been evacuated but affected by power lines being burnt up from their sources.
Okay. Miigwech, Dave Lamouche, thank you for this.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
After the break, Conservative Party's public safety critic Raquel Dancho talks about gun control. Welcome back. The Liberals' revamped gun control bill C-21 continues to spark backlash in the House of Commons after withdrawing proposed amendments to the bill in February due to calls of resistance from opposition parties and Canadians. A new revised gun policy continues to be debated. Last week, a motion was passed in the House to limit debate and move the bill through the process faster. Some Indigenous groups and people are concerned the bill will infringe on their hunting rights. Last week on Nation to Nation, NDP MP Peter Julian said the bill will not impact Indigenous hunters now. This week, Conservative MP Raquel Dancho joins us. She's her party's Shadow Minister for Public Safety. Welcome.
Thank you, Annette, for having me.
So the intent of Bill C-21 is to get rid of automatic weapons in the streets. City dwellers would agree with that. What's the problem with this bill?
What Bill C-21 originally set out to do was focus on handguns, despite the fact that it was focusing on lawful owners of these firearms. We know the problem in Toronto, Vancouver, Winnipeg is gangsters and criminals who are smuggling in these firearms from the United States. We have a very porous border. Justin Trudeau has done very little to stop that problem. So what police are telling us, what victims of these crimes are telling us, that the impact has been gangsters and criminals smuggling in these firearms from the United States. And unfortunately, this bill will do very little to address the real problem of gun violence in this country. And then ultimately, you'll well remember, as will your viewers, when the largest attack on hunters in Canadian history was brought forward by the Liberals in an amendment to C-21 in the fall of this past year. And there was a very long list of all the firearms they were going to ban. And there was a lot of Indigenous hunters and other hunters in Canada who spoke up and said, hey, my firearm is on this list. So now, unfortunately, the Liberals have made it even worse, and they're being supported in that with the NDP support, lock, step, and barrel, so to speak. What's happened is they've taken that list out of the bill. They're being very sneaky, and now they're giving it over to a secret committee that will ban these sort of behind the scenes. That's what we're seeing what will happen.
So I said it in my intro, I had mentioned Peter Julian had said last week that Indigenous hunters would not be impacted by this bill. He went further to accuse the Conservative Party of playing games. How do you respond to that?
It's very disappointing to see the NDP turn their backs on their constituents. We were very hopeful at the beginning when, again, the Liberals brought forward the largest hunting rifle ban in Canadian history. The NDP seemed to listen to their constituents, many of them being First Nations, Inuit and Métis, and say, we're the Conservatives, we don't agree with this. And now the Liberals have brought forward a very similar definition. They've hidden the list from Canadians and plan to ban many of the firearms on that list that impacted Indigenous Canadians, like the SKS, for example. That's the most popular hunting gun in Canada for many indicators. They've said the secret committee will be looking at banning that. So unfortunately, Mr. Julian is spreading a lot of misinformation about what this bill is about. There's only lip service to Indigenous rights. There is no guarantee that the Liberals will be putting those rights first and foremost. And we heard from the AFN, as you'll recall, a few months ago, who condemned the entire C-21 bill in a resolution. The entire bill, they didn't want C-21. So these very minor changes and less transparency in C-21, to me, that says there is no more rights being protected by C-21. So I think the AFN resolution that condemned the entire bill stands. And we're ensuring as a Conservative Party that the rights of all Canadians, of First Nations, Inuit and Métis, their right to hunt is protected. They need these tools in it. And we've heard from the Premier of Nunavut, the Premier of the Northwest Territories, that semi-automatic long guns are critical in protection of their communities against polar bears, critical in their hunting rights, and the Liberals will continue their assault on lawful firearms owners, and the NDP is supporting them, so unfortunately they have the votes.
The motion that was passed last week that was meant to limit debate on this and move the legislation through faster. Is there a way that all parties can, or something that all parties could agree on, whereas restrict automatic weapons, but not infringe on the rights of Indigenous hunters?
All parties do agree on banning automatic weapons, which was done in the 1970s. So what's happened is the Liberal government is changing the target, so to speak. So they're saying that many hunting rifles, now they're referring to them as these military assault weapons, which is a made-up term designed to scare people who don't have firearms. But hunters know, and we've seen the hand shown by the Liberals when they say this made-up term, assault-style weapons, which is the term that they've created. We know now, because we've seen the list that they want to ban, they mean hunting rifles. And so we know that Canadians, particularly hunters, will not be tricked by this. The Liberals, in partnership with the NDP, showed what they want to do. And you'll recall the Prime Minister said, yes, some firearms used for hunting will need to be banned. That's what he said to Canadians. So we know what their intentions are. And the fact that the NDP and the Bloc Québécois in Quebec are supporting them every step of the way, I think it should be deeply concerning. But Conservatives have really fought hard for hunters to be able to keep the tools they need, and we will continue to do that.
There's another bill, a proposed bill, that's causing some friction, Bill C-48. Its goal is to tighten up bail conditions. What's wrong with this bill?
So in 2018-2019, the Liberals brought forward a bill called Bill C-75. It was 200 pages long. And really what it did was create this very dangerous catch and release policy where criminals who are proven dangerous repeat offenders who have hurt innocent Canadians are just getting in and out of jail, in and out of jail, in and out of jail. They're getting out on bail very easily, and they're killing and hurting innocent Canadians while out on bail. That was a result of Bill C-75, and we've heard this from police and every premier in the country, including the territories and all the big city mayors in Ontario, saying that bail reform is much needed, and much of them, particularly police, are pointing to Bill C-75, which was a Liberal bill from a few years ago. So the Liberals established this reckless catch and release system. Now they've brought forward an 8-page bill. Again, the original problem was 200 pages long. 8 pages. They're trying to tell Canadians this is going to fix all the problems. That is not true. What we need is a systemic overhaul of the reckless and dangerous system the Liberals created, and the only party that's going to do that is the Conservative Party.
Police chief has said that he's referred to the Gladue factors as being used as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Should this bill, C-48, should that have addressed this as well?
You know, again, I think we need to ensure that the rights of Indigenous people in Canada are respected, and that includes the victims in the Indigenous community. Again, missing and murdered Indigenous women, I believe, represent Indigenous women and girls are, I believe, the most likely by 5 times likely to be victims of violence and murder. So we need to ensure that the policies we're putting forward are ensuring that women and girls in the Indigenous community are protected first and foremost. That has not happened under the Liberal government. Their soft on crime and catch and release policies hurt the marginalized and victims the most. They have been ignored. Those voices have not been heard. Just today, I was with my leader, Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, and we announced a bill with a Conservative senator that will reinforce the Victims' Bill of Rights, which will particularly impact women who've been victims of domestic violence and abuse. They need to be put first, and that is our priority.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
all for now. Miigwech, thank you for
very
joining
much.
us.
Merci.
Stay tuned. After the break, a First Nation chief calls the proposed legislation to create a national council for reconciliation flawed. Welcome back. The act to establish a National Council for Reconciliation has been getting a cold response from Indigenous witnesses. Bill C-29 is the Liberals' answer to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action number 53. It is currently being studied by the Senate Committee on Indigenous Peoples. According to many Indigenous leaders, the process was flawed from the start due to no consultation. Bobby Cameron is the chief of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations in Saskatchewan. He joins us now on his thoughts. Welcome, Chief Cameron.
Thank you for having me.
Your recommendation to the committee this week was to ensure elders and knowledge keepers are included on the board. This recommendation came from other witnesses as well. Why is this so important?
Well, it's crucial in the sense where they have a better communication. They have direct input from the individuals who are walking libraries, okay? Our knowledge keepers, who are experts in the area of language and culture, experts in the area of inherent and treaty rights, experts in the area of our traditions, our protocols, our ceremonies. The list goes on and on. Our knowledge keepers have so many valuable lessons to teach. You can't learn what they know in a classroom or in a university class. These were our comments earlier this week. And for this particular topic, Bill C-29 has to go back to our First Nations to get more input, more inclusion. That was our direction, more inclusion. Here we have the Liberals setting up Bill C-29, okay? Recently, Prime Minister Trudeau came to our region and said, we will not entertain or we will not even look at discussing the NRTA. No, that doesn't sit well. But here they are trying to impose or push Bill C-29, reconciliation. Prime Minister Trudeau, reconciliation is supporting First Nations, treaty rights holders in eliminating the illegal document of the NRTA.
What else would you like to see, or who else, I should say, would you like to see on this board?
Well, you know, for each region amongst our treaty territories, that our knowledge keepers be fully involved. It's our understanding that they want to have 13 individuals, and of the 13, 4 are to be appointed from NWAC, AFN, ITK, and the Métis Nation of Canada. I don't know who those individuals are going to be, but if they don't listen to the direction we gave the other day to have knowledge keepers involved, but to also take this process back to our First Nations for more input, it will fail. It's as simple as that.
Switching gears now, there are a number of active wildfires burning in your province right now. How are the First Nations that are affected right now? Can you give us an update what's going on out there?
Well, obviously, amongst some of our First Nations, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to house those individuals and families who are uprooted and have to evacuate. I mean, it's culture shock for some of our knowledge keepers to be removed from home and even just adjusting to a certain diet, right? And a lot of our knowledge keepers rely on fish and traditional food. And for them to come to a city, in some cases foreign to them, and to have to adjust to Pizza Hut or some other food that they're not used to, it's culture shock. And you know as well as I do, to all the listeners, there's no place like home. The peace and safety within your own home, and to be removed and uprooted, it does something to a person mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So, praying that the weather changes, we get some rain, praying for those firefighters and all those involved to stop the fire from spreading, and that our people go home to, their First Nations where they feel comfortable and safe.
I've seen some fundraisers out there. The National Chief just sent something out as well. What is needed? How can people help?
Well, just much like Alberta and other places where there's evacuations happening, it takes a lot of resources to house families, to feed them, and for our children to entertain them, such as, an evening swim or, a movie night, whatever it may be. Like, it's up to each family to decide what they want to do with their children, but it definitely takes, resources to do those things. There's GoFundMe pages, there's different ways of donating. Certainly we support those First Nations in acquiring and securing those funds.
Finally, earlier this year, Saskatchewan passed its Saskatchewan First Act. The FSIN threatened blockades and legal action. What is happening now in regards to that law?
Well, the NRTA, that's where we're focusing on. Launching a statement of claim in the area of their lack of the failure to duty to consult is where they failed. It's an illegal document. It was a document that was connived and schemed with the federal government of the day and the provincial governments without First Nation inclusion. Okay? We agreed to share this land. We didn't agree to give up the resources. We only agreed to share the land to the depth of a plow or 6 inches of topsoil by way of treaty. Well, this didn't happen. The non-First Nation groups and governments, quite plainly, they lied to our people. And they tricked our people, basically. So we've been getting ready for several years. We have mandates, we have Chiefs Assembly's resolutions supporting us. And later on in the next couple of weeks, Musqueam is holding a NRTA summit where some of us will be traveling to support there. And, it's strength in numbers, united together to eliminate that illegal document, the 1930 NRTA.
Okay. Miigwech Chief Cameron, thank you for joining us. That's all we have for now.
Hi, Miigwech.
That's all for tonight's Nation to Nation. If you missed any part of tonight's show, you can check out our podcast. Go to aptnnews.ca/podcast. See you next Thursday. Miigwech, enjoy your evening.